Good afternoon. Let me continue from my previous class. In the previous class, we have learned about the various dependencies. There we have learned about the resource dependency, the control dependency, and the data dependency, and we have looked into the ways of how a data dependencies can be detected so that we can exploit parallelism. Take the same example that we have discussed in the previous class, and then let me continue with the previous class. Right? The given problem is going to be like this. So it was load R1 comma A. The second, this was the instruction 1. Instruction 2, add R1 comma it is R2 comma R1. Instruction 3 is move R1 comma R3. So instruction 4 is store B comma R1. Right? So this was a given problem. Right? This was the given problem. Right? The statement 1, load the contents of accumulator to register R1. The second one is add the contents of register R1 and R2 and put the sum in a R2. The third one is move the instruction available in register R3 to R1. Store the contents from register R1 into memory location B. And I think at the end of the previous class we have drawn a dependency graph. Right? Now there we have discussed 5 types of dependencies. The first one is a flow dependency. The first one is flow dependency. The second one is anti-dependency. And the third one is output dependency. The fourth one, input output dependency. The fifth one is unknown dependency. Now as I said, now the first 3 are concerned with the data. The fourth one is concerned with the read-write operation that is performed on a memory. Either you read or write into a memory. There you will see the IO dependency. For example, if you are trying to write to a same memory location, then it would result in a IO dependency. If two processes are trying to update the data into same memory location, then IO dependency occurs. Right? Now these 3 things we have discussed: flow dependency, anti-dependency, and output dependency. Now how do you define this flow dependency? I would simply say if the next statement needs the results of the previous statement. So I am going to call it as a flow dependency. Right? For example, if S1 output needed for S2. If S1 and S2 are sequence, and if S1 and S2 statements are in sequence, and if S1 output is needed for execution of S2, then such one we are going to call it as flow dependency. Now coming to the anti-dependency, what is this? Again here, if S1 and S2 instructions are in sequence, and if S2 output overlaps S1 input. So if S2 and S1 are in sequence, if S1 and S2 are in sequence, and if S2 output overlaps S1 input, then we call it as a anti-dependency. And the third one, output dependency. If the output generated by 2 statements, say S1 and S2 are same, then we call it as output dependency. So that is simply S1 S2 output same. Now this is what we have studied from the definition. If S1 and S2 outputs are same, then we call it as a output dependency. Right? And for this we have derived and drawn a dependency graph. Right? Now but I am using a tabulation method to solve this or draw the graph. So the tabulation method is going to be like this. Right? Now the first column is going to be like this. I am going to give the right. So I am going to use like this. I'm going to draw a table like this. So in this I'm going to fill the columns with the dependencies. This I'm going to call it as flow dependency. Second one is anti dependency. The third one is output dependency. Right? Got this? Right. And again under each row I'm going to divide it into rows. Right. And then I'm going to look into the statements. In the first one I'm going to look into S1 and S2. Again I'm making comparison with S1 and S3. Again I'm making comparison with S1 and S4. Right? So 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4. I am finding out the dependency relation. Similarly, then again it is going to be S2, S3, S2, S4. Then again S3, S4. Right? So how many combinations I get? So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So between S1 and S2, S1, S3, S1, S4, similarly S2, S3, S2, S4 and then S3 and S4. Statement 3 and 4. I am trying to derive the relation. If there is a flow dependency relation, then I am going to mark S there. If it is not, I am going to mark a into. I am using convention of yes and no. Right? Now looking at the first one, S1 and S2. S1 and S2. Right? What does the flow dependency says? The output of S1 should be a input for S2. Right? What is the output of S1? Output of S1 is you are loading the contents of R1. Does that needs is it as an input to the S2? Right? Yes, because output of S1 is an input for S2. So I am going to put a tick mark here. Right? Similarly, consider the next one. Consider the next one, S1 and S3. What is the output of S1? Output of S1 is R1. But what is the needed in S3? Is S1 output needed here? Because S1 output is R1. But what is S1 needed here? No, it is not needed. So I am going to put it as a cross here. Because in S3 you need R3 value. Even though you are updating the value of R1, but output of S1 is R1, that is not needed as a input here. So I am going to put it as a cross now. Again S1 and S4. Now what is the output of S1? Output of S1 is R1. What is the input for S4? Input for S4 is R1. Input for S4 is R1. So there is going to be a relation here. Right? There is going to be a relation here because the output of S1 is R1, the input for S4 is R1. So output, input. So I am going to put a yes here, a tick mark. Now coming to the S2 and S3. S2 and S3. What is the output of S2? Output of S2 is R2 because R1 plus R2 and it is moved to R2. It is going to be output of S2 is R2. What is the input for S3? It is R3. R3 is the input needed. Output is R2, input is R3. So there is no flow dependency, right? Now looking into the S2 and S4. Output is R2, but the input needed is R1. So again there is no dependency here. Now looking into the 3 and 4. What is the output of 3? R1. Because we are moving the contents of R3 to R1. Output of S3 is R1. What is the input of S4? Input of S4 is R1. We need the value of R1 to move to the location, memory location B. So output is what the input is needed in S3 and S4. So I am going to put a yes mark here, a tick mark here, a cross and a tick. So this method I have derived on my own to find the dependencies, right? Now similarly, if you look into the anti-dependency, what does the anti-dependency says? S1, S2 should be in sequence and S2 output should overlap the S1, right? S2 output should overlap the S1. Clear with this? Right. Now coming to the S1 and S2. S1 and S2, does the output overlaps here? No, it doesn't. Again S1 S3, does the output overlaps R1? No, because the outputs are same here, but it doesn't overlaps, right? Again you don't see any this thing. And S1 and S4 output is the memory location, but again it is S1 and S4. Output here is R1, this one. Now does it overlaps here? No. Similarly S2 and S3, the output is R1, but here it is a input, so it is overlapping. S2 and S3 are overlapping. S2 and S3 are, so this is the output input, it is overlapping. Similarly S2 and S4, S4 is R1, but here R1 input, no, it is not overlapping. Similarly for S2 S3, is there any overlap? No, because output is a memory location that you are writing, but here no overlap. So there is only one anti-dependency with S2 and S3. Similarly, coming to the output dependency, right? Now what is the output of S1? R1. Output of S2 is R2. So there is no dependency here, output dependency. Similarly, S1 and S3, R1 and R1. Here the value of S1 is R1, the outcome of S3 is again R1, so S1 and 1 and 3 are output dependent, right? Again 1 is R1, 1 and 4. Is it output dependent? No, because you are writing it a memory location. No, right? Now again similarly S2 and 3. What is the outcome of S2 is 2, but whereas the outcome of S3 is 1, R1, so it is not. Similarly for S2 and S4, S2 outcome is R2, but S4 is memory location, writing to a location. S3 and S4, S3 is outcome of the output of S3 is R1, but what is the output of S4? It is writing the contents of R1 into memory location, so there is no output dependency, or simply performing a memory operation, right? So like this I have derived a method, right? Now from this table creating a graph becomes very simple, easy one. Now whenever I see a tick mark here, you select that one. So there is a relation between S1 and S2. What is that relation? It is flow dependency. Again there is a relation between S1 and S4. So S1 and S4, that is a flow dependency. Again there is a relation between S3 and S4. So I am going to S3 and S4, right? Because the flow dependency is represented using a arrow, right? Now anti-dependency S2 and S3. Where is S2 and S3? Between S2 and S3 there is an anti-dependency. I am going to represent it with a arrow with a dash here. So S2 S3 is anti-dependency, right? Any other thing? Right. Now again S1 and S3 there is a output dependency. Where is S1 and S3? S1 and S3 is output dependency. S1 and S3 is output dependency. So this is how I can draw a graph. Understood this approach? So very simple. You can use this table notation, whichever dependency is available you mark at that point, and then simply connect those corresponding nodes, those corresponding statements. From that you can simply draw a graph, right? And one more thing to be noted here is again S2 is flow dependent on itself, because S2 is flow dependent on itself because it performs a add operation and then move operation, right? Add and then move the contents to R2. So that is why S2 is flow dependent on itself, right? So like this, it is easy for you to draw a dependency graph. So this is the approach that I am going to use. If you feel comfortable using this, then probably you can adopt this to draw the dependency graph. Clear? We will take up one more example from the exercise problem, and then we will close this dependency graph and then move to the next topic. Clear? Right. Now, as I said, now we will take up a small example. This is problem number 2.5. Problem number 2.5 from you. The question goes like this. Analyze the data dependency among the following statements in a given program. So, he has given 5 statements. S1 load R1 1024, S2 load R2 M of 10, S3 add R1 R2, S4 store M of 1024 R1, S5 store M R2 1024, where Ri means the contents of register Ri and memory 10 contains 64 initially. So you need to compute 3 parts here. The first one is part A, draw a dependency graph to show all the dependencies. So we are going to do the first part now. Let me copy the given problem. Right, this is the given problem statement, question number 2.5 in your from your 3rd edition. Right, let us try out this. Right, now look into the given problem. So there are totally 5 statements, 5 instructions that needs to be executed. The first one is load R1 comma 1024. What does it means? Load the contents 1024 into register R1. Load the contents of the memory location 1024 into R1, right? Second one is load R2 comma M of 10. Load the contents in the memory location 10 to register R2. The third one, add R1 comma R2. So you have got the values of R1, R2 from the previous 2 statements. You have to add up and move the sum to R1. So again, perform addition and then move operation, both are a part of this. Now fourth one is again store the contents of R1 register. What does R1 register contains? R1 register contains the sum of R1 and R2. This is again output of the previous one. So move that into memory location 1024. Move the contents into memory location 1024. Again, fifth statement is store M of R1 1024. Now what does it means? Now move the value 1024 into a location that is available in register R1. So you have to move this value before, right? Now this is how the given statement is, and for this you need to draw a dependency graph, right? You need to draw a dependency graph. Now I am going to follow the same table method for this, but before that I think you need to brush up this. Flow dependency is nothing but output of S1. If it forms as a input to the second statement, then it is a flow dependency. If output of S2 overlaps S1, then it is anti-dependency, and if output of S1 and S2 are same, then it is output dependency. You just remember these 3 things, these definitions, then life becomes easy for us to solve the problem, right? Totally there are 5 statements, right? I'm going to use the same approach that is being used by me in the previous one. So it is going to be right. This is going to, it gives you the relay, then this is output dependency, flow dependency, this is anti dependency, right? And similarly, so it's going to be S1, S2, again S1, S3, S1, S4, S1, S5. Similarly, S2, S3, S2, S4, S2, S5. Right, then S3, S4, again S3, S5. Then one more row needs to be added, so then it is going to be S4, S5. So 1 2 1 3 1 4 1 5 2 3 2 4 2 5 3 4 3 5 4 5, right? So these are the relations things. Now coming to the first one, let me check out the flow dependency. What does the flow dependency says? Output of the present one should be an input to the next one. What is the output of the present instruction S1? Output is R1, but is it a input? No, it is not, right? Similarly, S1 and S3. S1 output is R1, but what about the input for S3? You need a R1 there, right? So there is a flow dependency here. You're getting the point here, because the output of S1 is R1, but whereas S3 needs R1 as a input, so there is a dependency here. Now similarly, S1 and S4. Now what is the output of S1? R1, but what is the input for S4? This S1 and S4. What is the output of S1? It is R1. What is needed here? R1 value needs to be updated here. Yes, but I'm going to put a star mark here. For S1 and S4, I'm going to put a star mark here. What is the star mark here? Because you are moving the contents of register R1 to memory location, but the values of those register R1 are somewhere updated in the previous instruction, right? Probably this may not be needed here, even though the output is R1, but that value gets updated somewhere here. So probably there is no dependency here, because when you look at it, output is R1, the input needed is R1 here, but in the previous instruction, because this R1 value gets updated, now this may not be the one, and it is a memory related operation. Usually for memory related operation we don't mark it, so that is why I'm going to put it as a no dependency here. Now coming to the S1 and S5, is there any reference needed here? S1 and S5, output is R1, but again input is this memory location. Again it is the same one, because R1 value gets updated, so there is going to be no. Coming to the S2 and S3, coming to the S2 and S3, what is the outcome of S2? R2. What is an input for S3? It is R2 is needed here, so there is a dependency here, right? Similarly for S2 and S4, S2 output is R2. Do we need the value of R2 here? No. Does S5 needs R2? Now coming to the 3 and 4, what is the outcome of S1? S1 outcome is R1. Do we need that in S4? Yes, it is needed. So S3 S4 is flow dependent. S3 S4 is flow dependent. Similarly S3 and S5, S3 output is R1, and again S5 you don't need that value, but you are going to write it in a value that is available there. And similarly S4, both are memory related operations, so there you don't see any dependency. Flow dependencies will not arise here, right? Coming to the anti-dependency, what does the anti-dependency says? S2 output should overlap the S1 input. Now S2, does this overlaps this one? No. S1 and S3, does this overlaps the input? No. S1 and S4, does this overlaps? No. And then 1 and 5, does it overlaps? No. Now again coming to 2 and 3, does it overlaps? No, because the output are same but it doesn't overlaps. Now S2 and 4, 2 and 4, does it overlaps? No. 2 and 5, does it overlaps? No. 3 and 4, does it overlaps? No. 3 and 5, does it overlaps? No. 4 and 5, does it overlaps? No. So you don't see any anti-dependency here, right? Now coming to the last one, output dependency. What is the, now again S1, S2. Output of S1 is R1, output of S2 is R2. So they are not same. S1 and this is R1 and R1 right here, because the output of statement 1 is R1, the output of statement 3 is R1. So I would say 1 and 3 are dependent, right? 1 and 4, 1 and 4, no, not dependent. 1 and 5, 1 and 5, not dependent, right? Again 2 and 3, 2 and 3, not dependent. 2 and 4, 2 you get a value of 2 and 4, not dependent. 3 and 5, 3 is R1, 5 is no. Again 3 and 4, 3 is R1, again 4, no. Then 3 and 5, no. And 4 and 5, no. One dependency here, right? You are going to get one dependency here. Now using this relation, if you are able to draw a graph, then it becomes very easy now. So I have my graph looks like this. S1, S2 has got both flow dependency and output dependency. S4 has got data dependency and S2 has got data dependency, flow dependency. S4, S2 is flow dependency, S2, S3 is flow dependency, right? Like this. Using this approach, I think this is a derived approach I derived on my own. Using this approach, you can draw the dependency graph, right? So the steps are very simple. List out the processes or the statements, then try to bring out the relation between every statement, right? Then again the corresponding columns, flow dependency, anti-dependency and output dependency. Depending upon that, if it is there is a relation between that, a flow dependency is there, put it as a tick mark, if not a cross mark. So once when you are through with this all the relations, then whenever you have put this tick mark, you take out that, draw the corresponding graph. Now with this we will be completing the dependency graph. Then we will go to the next topic. Next topic is it is a concept that is being devised to check whether the two statements can be executed in parallel or not. For example, a two process P1 and P2, two process P1 and P2, wherein P1 has got a set of inputs. P1 has got a set of inputs called as I1, and a set of outputs that are generated because of processor P1, it is going to be OI, and similarly the other processor P2 has got a set of input I2, and it has generated a set of outputs. It could be one single output or a set of outputs. It's going to be O2, wherein it generates the output. Now you could P2 can be executed parallelly if so they have given a three conditions. The first condition is going to be like this. They have defined three conditions. If you are fulfilling these three conditions, then you could simply conclude that these two processes can be executed parallelly, right? If you satisfy these three conditions, then automatically these two processes can be executed parallelly, right? Now what is the first condition given? The first condition they have given is input set I1 intersection of output set O2 equals to null. There should be no common inputs that are considered with the outputs that are being generated. The first condition is the inputs and the outputs. The second one is I2 intersection of O1. Again it has to be null. It has to be null. The third one is output of 1 intersection output of 2. Again it has to be null. There should be no common outputs between two statements, between two processes. So again the first one is the input set of the 1 should not have anything in common with the output set of 2. The input set of 2 should not have anything in common with the output set of 1. The output of 1 should not be equals to output of 2. So if you are able to satisfy these three conditions, then we can simply conclude that a given two process can be executed parallelly, right? So it was proposed way back in 1966 by Bernstein, and it has been called as Bernstein's condition. Bernstein's condition for parallelism, a very important concept, right? I think 10 out of 6 times you see a question on this in your VTU paper. Now he has proposed three conditions. What are those conditions? The first condition, inputs intersection of output should be null. Input intersection of output should be null. Output of 1 intersection of output of 2 should be null. So wherein I1 is the input set of the processor P1, whereas I2 is the input set of processor 2, and output generated because of process 1 is O1, and the output generated because of process 2 is O2. Now if you satisfy these three conditions, then simply you can say that the processor P1 and P2 can be executed parallelly. So they are going to represent it as P1 P2. So it means to say that we are going to represent this P1 parallel P2. So it means to say that at any point of time these two processes can be executed parallelly, and there is no change in the output, whether they are going to be executed first, second, first, or both together at some point of time. It doesn't creates any change in the output values because it satisfies these three conditions. And when you clearly look into these three conditions, you can make out the difference. No, this is input given as a output to the second one, input given as a output to the second one, input given as a output to the second one. Here input of 2 given as a output to the first one, output of 1 compared with the output of 2. So I would simply say that if you are able to satisfy the three dependencies, the three dependencies are flow dependency, then anti-dependency, and the third one output dependency. If you could simply say that two processes are not flow dependent, they are not anti-dependent, and they are not output dependent, then you could say that both the process can be executed parallelly, right? In this way you can exploit parallelisms, right? Using this Bernstein's condition, you could simply say that the processor P1 and P2 are parallel if they satisfy these three conditions. I1 intersection of I2 should be null, I2 intersection of O1 should be null, and again O1 intersection of O2 should be null. So it is simply the three flow dependencies, the flow dependency, anti-dependency, and output dependency. If you are able to satisfy these three conditions, then automatically any processor can be executed concurrently, and this doesn't changes the output. Similarly, if you have got three processors, say for example you have got three processes P1, P2 and P3, right? Now if P1 is parallel to P2, then automatically P2 will also be parallelly executable in P1. P2 can be executable in P1. Commutative property. So why, if P1 is parallelly operatable on P2, then the same is applies. P2 can be parallelly operated on P1, right? But whereas consider three processes, P1, P2, P3. If P1 is parallel to P2 and P2 is parallel to P3, are you assured that P1 is going to be parallel to P3? So sometimes it is yes and sometimes it may not, right? So sometimes it could be yes and sometimes it is not. So this sometimes it holds good and sometimes it may not, and it's not assured that if P1 is parallelly operatable to P2 and P2 is parallelly operatable to P3, it's not that always P1 can be operatable parallelly with P3. That may not be the scenario many a times, right? Clear? So this property is not satisfied. Clear with this? So right, now to make you better understand this, we'll solve a small problem on this Brinson's condition, because your textbook has given a example and there are many problems in the exercise. We'll take up one problem and then we'll try to solve the problem on this and try to derive whether it could be executed parallelly or not. Clear with this? Right. Right. So we're going to look into a exercise problem and then we'll come back to the solved problem in the one. Right. Now the problem goes like this. Consider the execution of the following code segment consisting of 5 statements using Brinson's condition to detect the maximum parallelism embedded in this code. Now I'm going to repeat it. Consider the execution of the following code segment consisting of 5 statements using Brinson's condition to determine the maximum parallelism embedded in this code. Now you have to find out how many instructions could be executed parallelly. So here they have given 5 statements. The statements are going to be like this. I'm going to list out the statements now. The statements are like this. The first statement is A equals to B plus A is equals to D plus E. Then G equals to B plus E. C is equals to D star F. K equals to E by C. C is equals to M plus G. So this is statement 1, statement 2, statement 3, statement 4, statement 5. I just write the first statement. A is equals to D plus E. The second one, S is equal to G plus B E. S3. C is equal to D star F. Statement 4 is K is equals to E by C. And the fifth statement is C is equals to M plus G. So these are the 5 given statements, and then try to bring out parallelism using the Brinson's approach. Right? Now for solving this, there are 2 steps here. The first step is going to be like this. The first step is list out all the given inputs and outputs. List out all the given inputs and outputs. Right? If you consider the statement S1, what is the input for the statement S1? Input is D and E. So D and E are the inputs for the statement S1. What is the output for statement S1? A is the output. Similarly, when you consider the fifth one, S5, what is the input? Input is going to be M and G. What is the output? Output is going to be C. Right? So likewise, again for solving this, I am using a table approach. I am going to draw its 2 sets of tables. Using that table, I will be trying to find out the parallelism among all these statements S1 to S5. Clear? Right. The first step, input output set of given processes. Input and output of given processes. Input output set of given process, right? How many processes are there? There are 5. Right? I'm going to use like this. So this is going to be process, input set, output set. Then 5 are there. Right? It's going to be S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. What is the input for S1? What is the input for S1? Input for S1 is D comma E. What is the input for S2? It is B comma E. What is the input for S3? D comma F. For S4 input is E comma C. For S5 it is M comma G are the inputs. Now what is the output for S1? It is going to be A. Output for S2 is G. Output for S3 is C. Output for S4 is K. Output for S5 is C. Right? So the first step is list out the inputs and outputs set. Clear? List out the input and output set. Right? And what is the condition given? What is the condition for distance parallelism? The first condition is I1 intersection of output 2 equals to null. This is condition 1. Condition 2, input sets of second processor intersection of output 1, again it should be equals to null because there should be no common variables there. The third one is output 1 intersection of output 2, again it has to be null. So if you satisfy these 3, then you could say those two processes are executable in parallel. Right? Now again this is step 1. So what is step 2? Oh, step 2 I have to write this. Let me clear this one first, because these values are available here itself. Let me draw a table for it here. Again for this I am using one more table. So it is going to be like this. So this is going to be condition 1, condition 2, condition 3. This is process set. Right? So I have to make a comparison between S1 and S2, S1 and S3, S1 and S4, S1 and S5. Right? S1 and S5. Similarly, S2, S3, S2, S4, S2, S5. Then similarly, 3, S3, S4, S3, S5. Then it's going to be S4, S5. These are the 5 sets. Right? So what is the first condition? Input of S1 is D and E, D and E intersection of G. Are there anything common here? Are there anything common here? No. It is going to be null. Intersection of D and E and G is null. So this condition is verified. Right? Similarly, between S1 and S2, what is this? I2 and I1. What is I2? I2 is B and E and the output is A. B and E and A. Are they null? Are there anything common? Nothing is common here. So this condition 2 is verified. Condition 2 is this. What is condition 3? Condition 3 is the output of S1 and S2. S1 and S2 intersection is null. because this is A and G, so this condition is satisfied. Now if all the three conditions are satisfied, what is it that you can conclude now? I can simply conclude that S1 and S2 can be executed in parallel, right? So I am simply going to write like this. Where can I write? So I am going to write that one, S1, S2. I could simply say S1 and S2 can be executed in parallel. So I am going to put a tick mark here, right? The next one is I am going to compare between S1 and S3. S1 and S3, this one. So what is the input for S1? BE, output is C. BE and C, is there anything common? No. Then similarly for second condition, BF and A, there is nothing in common. But S1 and S3, A and C, is it common? No, right? So similarly, if you get all the three conditions right, then automatically you can say you can execute S1 and S3 parallelly, right? Similarly, go for S1 and 4, 1 and 4. 1 and 4 input is BE, the output is K. Anything common? No. Then again EC and A, no. A and K, no. So this condition is satisfied. So I can simply say that S1 and S4 can be executed parallelly, right? Coming to the next one, S1 and 5, 1 and 5. What is the input? DE, output is C. So no, nothing is common. Then again condition 2, it is 1 and 5, it is MG and A. So it is no common, it can be executable. Again 1 and 5, 1 and 5 output A and C, not common, right? Right. Now I would simply say S1 and S5 can be executed parallelly, right? Now coming to the second one, S2 and S3. What is S2? BE, output is C. So it is not common. Again next one is S3 is D and F, it is G, nothing is common. C and G, it is 2 and 3, no? G and C, nothing is common. So I could simply say 2 and 3 can be executed parallelly, right? The next one is 2 and 4. 2 and 4, BE and K. Yes, input is EC, output is G, right? Again 2 and 4 is G and K, it is tick mark. So this can be executed parallelly, right? Now coming to the 2 and 5. 2 and 5. Now what is the input? BE, output is C. Is there anything in common? No. Again input of 5 is MG, the output is G. So there is a common G here, G input and G output. So this condition is not satisfied. The condition 2 is not satisfied. Now coming to the third condition, between 2 and 5, G and C, it is satisfied. Now if one of the condition is not satisfied, what does it means? It simply says that 2 and 5 cannot be executed in parallel because there is a anti-dependency here. Clear? Right. Similarly, if I go to the 3 and 4, 3 and 4, 3 is BF, output is C, I can. And then again, sorry, 3 and 4, no? 3 and 4, DF and K, nothing is common. Then again it is 4 and 3, EC and C. 3 and 4, 3 and 4, output is EC but the input is C, it is a common here, right? And then again 3 and 4, 3 and 4, 3 and 4 is C and K, it is right. Now I would simply say 3 and 4 cannot be executed. 3 is D, F, K, yes, but whereas EC, C, it cannot because it violates the second condition, and the output is CK, right? It completes, right? Similarly, when you look for the 3 and 5, 3 and 5, input is DF, output is C. 5 is MG but the input is C. Condition 2 satisfied. But what about the output? 3 and 5, output is C, here also it is C. So this condition is not satisfied. Then what do you mean by this? You cannot execute this parallelly, right? Similarly, coming to the fourth and fifth, EC input is EC, output is C. So there is a common here. So the first condition is not satisfied. The second one, MG, K, it satisfies. K and C, it satisfies. Because the condition is all three statements should be true, then only you can execute parallelly. So I mean to say that S1 and S2 can be executed parallelly, S1, S3 can be executed parallelly, S1, S4 can be executed parallelly, S1, S5 can be executed parallelly, S2, S3 can be executed parallelly, S2, S4 can be executed parallelly, but whereas the remaining one, they cannot be executed parallelly. So in this way you can make out S1 can be executed, S1, S2, then again S2 can be executed with S3. Again, is 3 possible with any other? No, right? So similarly S1, so let me write like this, S1 can be executed parallelly with S2, again S1 can be executed parallelly with S3, S1 can be executed parallelly with S4, S1 can be executed parallelly with S5. Similarly S2 can be executed parallelly with S3 and S2, S4, right? Now this many number of instructions could be executed parallelly, but for the others there is a dependency. You have to execute and then clear the dependency and then you have to move out, right? In the next class I am going to look into the number of instructions that it takes when you execute concurrently and then sequentially. For this we are going to draw a hardware representation so that you can count the number of the number of cycles that it takes, and if it is executed sequentially and if it is executed concurrently, the number of clock times that it takes, you can look into it, and then you can measure what is the number of clock ticks that are saved because of executing concurrently or parallelly, right? Now with this I am going to end my today's session. So in the next class I am going to take up one more example. I am going to solve on this principle and then try to derive a hardware model, and then we will go ahead with the networking issues. Clear? I believe this lecture is clear to you, because the approach that I have used is derived by me. I tried this and I feel that I don't get confused and life becomes easy for me to solve a problem. So if you are interested, you can take up this approach. Clear? Right. So with this I am going to end my today's session. Thank you for your patience listening.